So let's make sure we can add our user ID to outgoing chat messages here. It's not too hard because thankfully we got that Firebase auth object. Now to utilize it, you need to make sure that you are importing the Firebase auth Dart file from the Firebase auth package. And with that, you can tap into Firebase auth. So you can use this object here. There, access the active instance, and on that instance, you'll find a current user method. This gives you access to the currently logged in user, and that will then include data like the user ID. Now, current user actually gives us a future which will eventually resolve to our current Firebase user. So therefore here, I'll add async so that I can await here and get access to the user. Like this. So then this line will only execute once we got the user. Now we can utilize that user and set user ID equal to user.uid. There is a UID field on that user object which holds our current ID. And with that, we can clearly map this chat message to this user. Now, of course, the existing chat messages here don't have that. So I'll manually go there and add a new field to each message where I basically set the user ID equal to some dummy ID, like A, which of course is not my user ID, but that's fine. These messages simply aren't by me. So let's make sure we add all those fields here. And once we did that, we can go back and make sure that we render the message differently depending on whether this is us or not. So in the message bubble widget, we can add a second property, a boolean maybe, is me, which I also want to get from outside. So I also expect to get a value for is me through the constructor of message bubble. Hence we can go to the place where we create message bubble, which is the messages Dart file. And besides passing the text, we now also have to pass chat docs for the current index and then access user ID. User ID now is a field we have in every message. We have the ID of the user who wrote this message, so we can access it here. Now, of course, we don't want to forward the user ID though. Message bubble instead wants to know whether this is us or not. And this is just a string, not a boolean. So to find out whether that's us or not, we also need the current ID of the logged in user here in this line so that we can compare the ID of the current logged in user with the ID of this message. Now, there are various ways of retrieving that. A very elegant way, in my opinion, is that we actually wrap list view builder with another widget, which is now the future builder widget. Now, the future builder is a bit like the stream builder. The difference is that a future builder wants a future, and it calls its builder method as soon as the future resolves, as soon as the future is done. Hence, we add a future argument and then a builder argument. And the builder argument wants a function which receives the context and then also the future snapshot. And then we should return a widget. Now, the future I want to set up here is Firebase auth. And for that, you need to make sure that you do import the Firebase auth package and Firebase auth Dart file here. Firebase auth.instance and then call current user. As I explained a second ago, this gives us a future. Now, when this future resolves, this builder will execute and it will, well, build this list view. Now, actually, I don't always want to build that list view. So I'll wrap the list view builder here with curly braces and add a semicolon here because I want to check what's in the future snapshot. If future snapshot connection state is equal to connection state waiting, we don't have information about the user yet. In this case, I'll return a center widget where I have a circular progress indicator. A bit like I have it up there. And yes, you could therefore, of course, create one widget which you reuse here. Or a builder method. I'll simply repeat some code here. So that's one check. We could also check if we maybe don't have data. So if that is wrong. But if that is the case, if we don't have a current user, we shouldn't be on the chat screen anyways, because of the logic in the main Dart file, we should be seeing the off screen in that case. So there shouldn't be a need to really check for that. Hence, here at this point, we should indeed have a user, and we can then return the list view builder here. And there we now get access to the future snapshot, which, since we are basing this on the current user future, in the end just gives us access to the data of the current user. So then here we can compare if the user ID of that data we got from our messages collection, if that is equal to future snapshot.data.uid. Future snapshot.data is the current user object, and that has a UID property, as you saw in the new message widget. There we also access user.uid on the data returned by current user. And we're doing the same here. Now, there's one thing I'm not too happy about. I have my future builder here inside of that stream builder, which means for every new message we got on the backend, I would fetch my data for the current user again and again. And that is a bit redundant. Creating that new future and waiting for it to resolve on every new message that is sent doesn't sound that great. That's why I'll restructure this a bit, and I'll grab this code here, the future builder code, and move that up and actually return this here at the very beginning. And then here, instead of the builder method of the future builder, I will check if the future snapshot connection state is waiting. So let's add this here. And if it's not waiting, I'll return the stream builder. And down there, we return the list view builder again, but now that's inside of the stream builder. So I simply swapped stream builder and future builder to make sure that we don't create a new future just because something changed in our stream of data, which is coming from the Firestore collection. And with that, we should be fine though, and the rest works as it should. And now we're forwarding the information, whether that message is from us, to the chat or to the message bubble widget. So in the message bubble widget, we can now use this information, which is stored in this isMe property. For example, on the color of this container, we can check if isMe is true. And if it is, I don't want to use the accent color, but instead, let's say then I just want to use colors, gray, and there we can actually use this notation to use a specific shade of gray. So our own messages will be gray, and the messages of other users will be purple, or will use that accent color simply. And for the text color, we should do something similar. If it's us, I don't want to use the color that stands out against the accent color, but instead I'll use colors black, which stands out against the gray, and otherwise I'll use the accent color contrast color. We can also work on the border radius a bit and not set all borders to be rounded corners, but instead with border radius only, we can target specific borders. And let's say we always want the top left border to be circular, so to be rounded. We can target top left then and use radius.circular to set the radius of the top left corner to 12. And I'll do the same for the top right corner. But, and that's not important, I will do different things for the bottom corners. Let's say the bottom left corner should only be rounded if it's not us, because I also want to move messages to the left and to the right based on whether they're from us or not. So I'll set bottom left equal to a check where I check if it's not us, so the exclamation mark matters if it's not me. And if it's not me, then I'll set the radius to 0. And otherwise, I'll set the radius here to 12. So only if it's us, the bottom left corner will be rounded. And I'll do the opposite for the bottom right corner. If it's us, I'll set the radius here to 0. And otherwise, to 12. Now, as a result, the corners of this container will be rounded differently based on whether it's a message from us or not. And this matters because on the row, we can now set the main axis alignment to control where the message is rendered, if it's on the left or on the right, by also checking for isme, and if it's us, let's say, we want to move the message to the right, we can do this by setting the main axis alignment to end then. Or if it's not us, we set the main axis alignment to start. And therefore messages should now be rendered on different sides of the chat list. If we save all of that and reload, this looks good because these are messages not sent by us. But if I now send a message by me, so if I now send a new message, you see it's on the right, it's gray, and we also have these different rounded corners. So that looks pretty neat. Now, there is one thing I want to improve to ensure that this always is re-rendered in an efficient way. Let's use some keys. You learned that when you're working with lists of data, there can be issues with Flutter updating your widgets. And to ensure that Flutter is always able to efficiently update data in lists or widgets in lists, let's go to the message bubble widget, which is the widget we repeat in our list here. And let's add a key there. Let's accept a key there. Accepting a key is easy. We add a new property, which is of type key, and we name it key. And we simply then have a named argument here in the constructor where we point at the key. Now in messages.dart, we can now simply set this key here by targeting this newly added named argument. And now we need a unique key. We can create it with the value key and use some unique value. And every message here has a unique value. It has a unique document ID. So we can reach out to chat docs, and for the given index, access document ID, written like this, on this document. Every document will have an ID which can be accessed through this field. Now we won't see a difference here, but behind the scenes, this ensures that Flutter will always be able to efficiently re-render and update this list. It might not need that. It might be able to efficiently update this list even without the key, but it certainly also won't hurt.